Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. We're going to switch gears from the Shayna Hubers case and talk about the Roy Oliver case, another case we've been covering here on the Law and Crime Network. Again, Roy Oliver is a former Texas police officer on trial right now for the murder of 15-year-old Jordan Edwards. We've been hearing testimony all week in that case, but first let's get you caught up on this body cam footage from the shooting.
Hey, Hamburger, come here. Have a seat. Where do you go to school?
West Mesquite.
All these West Mesquite kids? Maybe?
Wow, some of them Mesquite. Pretty much all the time.
Listen, don't do this again.
Yeah, this is a one-time thing, sir.
Mr. Rhodes, I'm Officer Gross, okay?
Officer Gross.
I don't want to see this again.
Yeah, we'll see this again. I ain't expected to get this
I don't.
tight.
Hey, stop that car! Stop right there! Stop!
1661 code 2312 64 62 Just get around somewhere in the center area.
Stop! Copy 28. Charles Sam 7 Young 882. Charles Sam 7 Young 882. Hey, stop that fucking car! Stop that fucking car right now! That fucking car! You alright? Yeah, I'm fine. You're trying to hit you.
64 right now, southbound, Shepherd, turn on to Goodbye.
Stop! Stop!
Okay, you just saw body cam footage from the shooting of Jordan Edwards in this case. Now, to be clear, police had a legal right to be there. They were at this loud party. They heard shots. You could hear the shots ring out in the audio of that videotape. You can see the officer approaching the car. The car is continuously backing up, not listening to commands. So we can assume the officer believed that the vehicle that was leaving was involved in this shooting. And that's when things went horribly wrong. Again, Roy Oliver is on trial for murder. Brad, I'll go to you really quickly here. To play devil's advocate, again, the officers had a legal right to be there. I've been in those situations. But when I watched that body cam footage, the one thing that strikes me is that the car was backing up very slowly. It wasn't backing up at a high rate of speed as to try to get away. And then even when it pulls off, I didn't hear tires screeching or a peel out or anything like that. But it goes back to, we heard the testimony from Oliver's partner, Gross, that he says, I didn't believe I was in threat of this vehicle. But Oliver, from his vantage point, believed that he was in threat. You could actually hear him on the body cam audio say he tried to run you over. So I think this entire case, granted, no one in that car was armed, but I think this entire case will come down to what his perception was.
Can weigh very much on the jurors in the sense that they think, what is this guy really about? He just did this a couple weeks before this incident. He did something very similar in the sense that he pulled over some folks and pointed a gun at them. I think also those witnesses who testified about that earlier incident, though, raised a lot of points about how their recollection of that incident, those two witnesses had some inconsistencies, which I think also goes to show that in the heat of the moment, it's difficult to ascertain exactly what's going around you. And I think in that sense, it sort of helps the defendant in the argument that really when it's all unfolding and there's so much commotion, it's really hard to determine what that threat is.
Right, exactly. And speaking of the defendant, let's hear from Roy Oliver himself. Let's listen to part of his testimony. Okay, that was testimony from Roy Oliver himself, and he was talking about the fender bender he had with the two witnesses that testified previously that he pulled his gun on them. I was in patrol for quite some time when I was doing policing in Nashville, and the one rule I always had was never approach anyone as a police officer when I'm off duty and in civilian clothes, because the one thing they will not assume you are is a police officer, and that could have gone horribly wrong so fast. I think he should have just, if he thought they were making furtive movements, just gone back to his truck, call for backup, get on the radio or whatever. But you never should approach anyone in civilian clothes off duty as a police officer, especially when you're pulling your gun out, because they don't know you're the police. That's just me. Jennifer, I'll go to you. What do you think about that? I mean, that doesn't look good. And if someone approached you on the street with a gun pointed to you in civilian clothes, no markings that say police, are you going to assume they're the police?
No, I don't think so. And I think the prosecution is going to try to capitalize on this theme that this officer, Roy Oliver, is essentially a bad apple, that he engages in this pattern and practice of this aggressive behavior. The prosecutors described him in opening statements as trigger happy and out of control. And so that's what this testimony, I think, is going to help them argue.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad, real quick in 30 seconds, what do you think about that testimony there, this fender bender?
I think it's a perfect example of why defendants usually don't testify, because I believe that the road rage incident was ruled inadmissible in pretrial motions.
Right.
And then he opens the door by taking the stand and mentioning it, which is then what leads to the other two witnesses. And this incident is going to be very, very hurtful to him because it shows a pattern of rage and excessive use of force. And I think it's going to be really, really hurtful when it goes to the jury.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about a simple fender bender. Let's get back and hear a testimony now from the use of force expert in this case, Philip Hayden. Take a listen. Okay, you just heard testimony from Philip Hayden. He's a use of force expert. He talked about what is reasonable, and he says that the actions of Roy Oliver were not reasonable on that day, the day he shot and killed 15-year-old Jordan Edwards. I know my two guests have to sign off here. It's about that time. Jennifer joining me from Chicago. I appreciate you. I hope you enjoy your weekend there in Chicago. I hope the weather's still nice. Brad, as always, a pleasure having you here in the studio.
Thanks for having me again, Vincent.
Absolutely. I'm sure I'll see you again soon.
Hopefully.
Again, we're covering the Roy Oliver murder trial. He's on trial right now for the death of 15-year-old Jordan Edwards. Roy Oliver is a former police officer who says he was protecting the life of his partner. He thought his partner was getting ran over by a vehicle. You don't want to miss it. We have more of this trial when we come back here on the Law and Crime Network. Stay tuned.